Thank you, Tom. Our next writer, her name is Jenny Scott. She's a freelance writer who has worked for ad agencies and newspapers. Her short stories and poetry have been published in the Antigonish Review, Blue Mountain Arts Books, Nostalgia Magazine, Arts Beat, and the Batavia Writers Literary Journal. She was the poetry editor of Arts Beat for 1 year. She is currently working on her first novel. Tonight she's going to read a couple of poems and a short story. Jenny?
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Jim the wine pourer. Thank you guys for being here and for listening. This is a very short story that was published in the Antigonish Review called At the Time of His Death. Anton was fond of quoting Winston Churchill, who, on being told he would live 20 years longer if he did not drink, smoke, or eat so much, said, "It would only seem 20 years longer." Whenever Anton would say this, lifting his mug of beer or lighting another cigarette, Marta would reply with the old Marx Brothers line, "He looks like a fool and talks like a fool, but don't let him deceive you. He is a fool." So that was the first thing she thought of upon waking next to Anton and finding him dead. Fool. It was such a jolt, but she'd known it right off. She knew he was dead before she even turned to look at him. She could feel an absence where there had always been a presence, and when she did finally roll over into the further depths of the old feather bed and touched his static ashen face, she knew that she'd been right. Even so, she couldn't really believe it, and she wondered briefly if life ever really believed in death. She knew that Anton had been quieter lately, that he saw the doctor more often, that he had assumed the betrayed look of the elderly, but she never expected to wake and find him dead next to her. Marta knew she was supposed to do something now, to take some sort of action, but she wasn't sure just what that was. She didn't know if she should call the doctor, the coroner, or one of her children. She knew there would be a vast sadness and that it would be especially hers, but she didn't feel it yet. He had been her only love. She sat up, moved to the edge of the bed, and in the cool, shade-darkened room, she felt with her feet for her slippers. She sat there a moment and was thrown back to the time when Anton proposed. They were up north on a boat on a sun-sparkling lake. It was the first time she'd ever been on a boat. The air was so fresh and clean-smelling. She was busy tracing the tips of the shore's crowded pine trees with her eyes when Anton said he loved her. Would she marry him? She said yes. She said she loved him too, but she wasn't really sure. She was so young. His arms, while they rowed, made an impressive show of muscles. His blue-green eyes matched the lake. There were ducks gliding all around with ducklings following. There was that air. She loved something, that was certain. They went on to fill their small house with 9 children. 9 children still alive, and now grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. She could not have hoped for more from life, and yet she did. She walked slowly into the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker as she did every morning. Anton had set it up the night before, had ground the beans and measured the water as usual. All she had to do was flip the switch. She sat at the big, empty maple table and listened to the coffee maker spit and bubble. She had hoped for more. She had always been selfish for life. She'd had children in all the rooms, plants fighting for life in most of the windows. She'd tripped over dogs and boxes of kittens while she hurried around with a baby on her hip. There was always a baby on her hip, and then one day there wasn't. She had wanted it to go on and on. She saw one day years ago when Anton, all dusty with construction work, came in the back door with a bag of oranges for the children, that she did love him, specifically him. He looked so tired, so average. She thought her heart might break, might be damaged by such love. It was so painful. She poured a mug of coffee, held it up to her, and let the steam curl around her face. She walked back to the bedroom, careful not to spill. She stood over him and felt not sadness at all, but only a dim, growing anger. Traitor, she wanted to tell him. It wasn't enough, she wanted to say. But she didn't know how she, Marta, who had created all those people, could ever again create something as tricky as sound, as thick as words. Thank you. Thank you. This is a poem that won a prize and was published by Blue Mountain Arts about my daughter, and it was written years ago, just so you know. It's not about her now, because she's here. Okay, it's called This Girl of Mine. My boy came like rain, expected and needed. There was no thought to love. It just was, like the beautiful tea-stained birthmark that leaked onto his tiny stomach, like his fluid blue eyes that searched for the next good meaning. As soon as he could hold a book, he did. We read to the heart-like ticking of the clock, the steady, wintry hum of the furnace. He listened to what I had to say like I was a sage, a song, a mother. I knew I'd never love another child, not like that. Still, 2 years later came my girl, a girl who grabbed for life the way that dawn grabs for light. When she was able, I put a book in her tiny hands and she threw it across the room. Threw it like it was an old toy, a handful of wilted flowers, a slightly broken heart. How could this be, this girl of mine who doesn't love to read, who doesn't love the weighty feel, the inky, ruddy smell, the brainy, secret nerve of books? Well, she loves the things outside of books. She loves the things that books are about. A teenager now, she still hugs as loud as she yells. She has gardens of friends, girls like her. They have brittle, dramatic conversations. She feels so bad for a friend who has been forgotten by a boyfriend. But I can tell she doesn't really feel that bad. I can tell she's just trying on compassion, like one of those balled-up sweaters in the corner of her whirlwind room. I hope she'll choose compassion. I think she will. Her brown eyes are filled with refracting pools of wild love. In the city, she links my arm tightly with hers and kisses my cheeks, which surprises me, as if a butterfly has quickly landed there. When she was little, her legs ached often. She'd cry and say her legs felt wobbly. But her legs aren't wobbly anymore. They're strong and quick. Her feet click along in high-heeled, polka-dotted shoes, going where she wills them to go, fearless, fast, and headlong into life. I don't just love her. I fall in love with her every day. Thank you. Okay, and this is called Second Season. This has been published nowhere. Okay. After winter, even the name of the next is nascent, intimate, the P contracting the lips after the first low hissing sibilant, R descending in a visceral growl, and the suffix expelled in a halting vibration, a chord stretched taut, shaken free of swarthy moistness, shaken free, a dripping season, everywhere dripping, and I resent the wetness. Tears, token of winter's esteem, slide off the slick backs of vulnerable animals who twirl, saying with a cocky show of color, "Come dance with me." Parts swell like crested waves, buds protruberate on tender tips and hold until like fingers pried they know to open. Embryos fade to blastulas, egg membranes weaken like old hearts. With an egg tooth, a chick in unconscious agitation begins the journey toward its first confusing bath of sun. This place is full of raw, tangled emotion, and some choose to marry here. I do feel touched by lichen and cobwebs plastered in earnest, by beaks and rodent paws onto hidden nests for dubious camouflage against the likes of snakes and me. Once at the lake, from out of her muddy nest under the shore station's canvas top, a barn swallow flew out at me and quickly returned. Flew out like a pudgy slingshot to skim my head in warning, as if I had an interest in stealing her folded, naked babies. I've had my babies. I know the strain of guarding the young, the terror at the thought of the rest of the bulging, laboring, dripping world crouching to spring.